Human history. The West has presented a version of human history that most of Europe has accepted without question. Human evolution, the Darwinian story of primitive wanderers slowly becoming the modern, advanced humans we are today. But what if this entire narrative is wrong? What if human history has been curated to fit a Western framework, and anything that doesn't align with it is dismissed or labeled impossible? We say data doesn't lie, yet humanity continues to ignore countless clues pointing to far more advanced ancient civilizations simply because they do not fit the story we were taught. What if there is another version of our past? A version carried by the oldest civilizations, a story whispered in deserts, carved into temples, preserved in sacred texts, and passed down through cultures that never had contact with each other. And all of them insist on one thing: humanity did not begin in weakness. It began in strength. These accounts describe people who lived far longer than we do, who saw reality more clearly, who understood the earth in ways we can no longer imagine. They speak of humans who perceived more, who spoke a universal language, who interacted with beings we now call invisible, and who lived in harmony with a world that operated under different laws than the ones we experience today. For centuries, these stories were dismissed simply because they did not fit the Western version of history. But what if the issue is not the stories themselves? What if the issue is the framework we are forcing them into? Ancient Egypt spoke of a golden age called the first time, when humans lived alongside beings of greater knowledge and when the laws of nature were not the same as today. Mesopotamia wrote of antediluvian kings who ruled for thousands of years before a catastrophic fall that changed humanity forever. Quran describes the earliest generations as long-lived, perceptive, and capable of interacting with unseen layers of existence until the earth transformed and those abilities diminished. Different eras, different languages, different cultures, yet all of them follow the same pattern. A humanity of extraordinary ability, a catastrophic change, a dramatic decline, and then the beginning of the humanity we know today. If these stories were isolated, we could dismiss them, but they are not isolated. They are universal. And this raises questions Western science has never addressed. Why do ancient civilizations describe a humanity more advanced in longevity, perception, and consciousness than the one that supposedly evolved later? Why does the archaeological record show sudden explosions of knowledge rather than gradual development? Why do the oldest myths describe abilities we now consider impossible? A few European researchers have begun to ask these questions. Some Islamic scholarship addressed these more than 14 centuries ago. The idea that humans are not the only creation. The existence of beings made of smokeless fire. Realities that operate beyond our current senses. Assuming the ancient accounts were true, only one field could explain them: physics. For more than a century, physics has suggested that matter is not the foundation of reality, that consciousness does not arise from the brain, and that the universe contains invisible fields and hidden layers. If consciousness is non-local, if time is relative, if the universe runs on frequencies we barely understand, then a different kind of humanity living under different physical conditions becomes not only possible but logical. If early Earth carried a higher resonance, human biology would have functioned differently. Lifespans could stretch, memory could expand, perception could widen. Knowledge could be transferred intuitively rather than through writing. And when that resonance collapsed, everything humanity once relied on would collapse with it. Our ancestors remembered that moment as a fall, a rupture, the fall from Eden, the instant the world became smaller. From there, humanity had to rebuild. Writing, agriculture, measurement, and cities appeared. Not as inventions of primitive people, but as survival tools in a world that no longer supported the natural abilities humans once possessed. This controversial version of human history is not about fantasy. It is about reinterpreting ancient memory through the language of science. It is about recognizing that the humanity of today may not be the standard but the exception, and that our ancestors were not describing myths or miracles. They were describing a world governed by different physical rules. Once you allow this possibility, the entire human story transforms. Instead of primitive beginnings, you see a fallen civilization struggling to rebuild. Instead of evolution moving upward, you see a spiral collapsing downward. Instead of myths, you see history written in a language we no longer understand. This is the controversial human history. A version where humanity did not rise from the mud into intelligence, but fell from greatness into forgetfulness. A version where the past is not behind us but above us. And the big question is no longer how advanced we have become. The real question is how advanced we used to be. Today we understand something our ancestors could not describe scientifically. The Earth has a natural resonance. Human biology responds to that resonance. Our brainwaves, our circadian rhythms, our cellular processes, and even our emotional states synchronize with the planet's frequency. When the Earth shifts, we shift with it. Once you accept this, the ancient accounts begin to make sense. If the Earth once carried a different resonance, then humans living in that environment would not function like we do today. A higher planetary frequency would produce a different kind of biology, a different kind of perception, a different kind of consciousness. It would create a version of humanity that operated on a wider spectrum of reality. This is not mythology, this is physics. So this is the controversial version of human history. A story where humanity did not rise from simplicity into intelligence, but fell from a higher state into the world we know today. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Does this version of our past make more sense than the traditional narrative, or does it challenge everything you believe about human history? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.